This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Shice Podcast Network.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hello, Bad Movie lovers, and welcome back to Bad Movies We Love. I'm your host, Nick Scheist.
The master of this stupid stuff!
We are a few days removed from the Super Bowl, where Bad Bunny put on a great halftime show, and the New England Patriots lost emphatically. And I think that helped heal me a little bit because I'm feeling better, so I am a happy boy. And I'm going to need my strength as we continue our ascent or descent into horror month, depending on how you look at it. I am actively working on the first episode of Bad Movies Monthly, plus the 2025 year-end recap here at Bad Movies We Love. There is also a new episode of Rom-Comathon talking about The Family Stone. That is available for Resistance Frontline members. So there's plenty of stuff available for your perusal. But for this episode, I think we are ascending because I was joined by my buddy, my friend, very prolific and well-renowned horror author. Jonathan Janz is here once again. And this time we are taking on a very unique, a very interesting, a very fun, dare I say, folk horror satire. It's Antonia Bird's Ravenous from 1993.
It is a kick-ass movie.
The wettest prime rib I've ever seen.
The movie does such a good job at pointing out our willful ignorance of our history.
Whether it be to eat him or to be eating people with him, he always was like very fixated on Boyd's character. And
when they come upon his body, his entire like torso and belly, they're all opened up.
If I die, I die, but I'm not going to get eaten by this dude.
Great, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm the group member that gets a good grade because of you.
I know he's about to eat that little piece of leg jerky, and it gives me the creeps.
Feels like over time, people are kind of willing to see it for what it is, which is just pure awesomeness.
Mr. Calhoun, you said that when you ate the man. Do you mind if I ask? You said that afterwards your hunger was different, that you felt wanton.
Yes.
Did you feel at all physically changed? Stronger?
I seem to remember something like that. A certain virility. Why do you ask?
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to a former guest. My buddy Jonathan Janz is here.
Hello! Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I mean, I've been waiting for this one. We talked about doing this movie when we first recorded on Emily Rose. I think that was like 2 years ago at this point. It's been a long time, but we stayed friendly. We stayed in touch, and I always had this penciled in for you.
Nice.
And someone else brought it up to me, actually, and I was like, well, I already have someone who I said that, like, this is going to be our movie. So I was like, if that doesn't happen, then at least I have, like, a pinch hitter. But
Sure.
I always wanted to defer to you. But this episode will air in February, but it's the end of 2025 tomorrow, right? December 30th. So it's kind of crazy that this movie that we're talking about here is going to be 27 years old next year. Currently a 25-year-old film, but I mean, right about where we usually sort of operate with movies that make it to this show. And I think, oddly enough, both of the movies that we talked about, I would say, are not at all bad movies. And when we first talked about this one, I looked at like a couple of the numbers and I was like, okay, it's probably close, right? And then I actually like ran the detailed numbers and went into it, and I'm like, oh, this is more of like a bubble movie. And I don't know if in the 2 years that we've been waiting to do this episode, if it's gotten a little bit more of a resurgence, because it got to have like its 25th anniversary in the midst of that. And so maybe it had more of a reappraisal, more people started to watch it started to gain more ratings. It's still, I think, is sort of on the safer side of the curve, but one of the things I'm going to be doing in 2026 is I'm going to start including more bubble movies as specific picks of like, we're acknowledging that this movie is sort of on the bubble between what would most people would say is a good movie, and then I think what would be widely accepted as a bad movie. But, this was your pick, so why don't you introduce the movie that we're talking about?
So, Raven, and now's not when I do the little thing, is it? Is now when I do the?
No, we'll get to that later. I'll cue you in, and we'll get the haiku in there.
Gotcha. I just didn't want to miss my cue. So, yeah, Ravenous is about a character played by Guy Pearce, and I forget what year in the 1800s, but he, in an act of cowardice, he does something heroic because of an act of cowardice, or an act of cowardice allows him to be in a position to be a hero. So the American government is in this weird position of wanting to both punish him and reward him. So he receives a higher rank militarily, but is basically banished to Fort Spencer in the Sierra Nevada mountains. California sounds like a great place to go, but this particular part of California is not a great place to go. Not a lot around the Sierra Nevadas where he's stationed and around Fort Spencer. So he goes there kind of knowing that he's being punished and fraught with a great deal of guilt, and meets the inhabitants of Fort Spencer. Their job is basically to help people who get lost or stuck on the way through the mountains because it's so remote. And everything changes when a face appears in the window outside of the main military man's office. Guy Pearce and Jeffrey Jones, who's better known as Principal Rooney, I believe, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Those two look out the window and see this face. This visitor shows up who's supposedly been lost for 3 months in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and then everything in the story changes.
Yeah, it starts to really intensify at that point. And I think when we reach that point in the film, all of a sudden there's a lot more genres layered on top than there are when we start, because I always, like, in my head, I always thought of this and sort of remembered it as folk horror, which I think it is. But I'm like, oh, this is very clearly like a Western. It's a frontier movie. Like, it's definitely a Western period piece horror movie. So it's a lot of things happening at once. And then as I've gotten older, and I think as there's been more reappraisal, there's been a better understanding of the movie as a work of like satire as well. And a lot of the actors have spoken about how, like, yeah, the movie's meant to be funny and you're actually like supposed to have some of that levity in those moments. And I think to me, that's probably the most interesting, because I was trying to think, like, are there other horror satires that don't lean into like real comedy at some point? Because like with this, like, there's some moments of levity, but there aren't punchlines, there aren't jokes, there's not really like slapstick kind of moments that much. I think you could maybe say like, yeah, there's a couple, but realistically, like, it's kind of dark. It was described as like gallows humor, and I really like that phrasing. But yes, we're talking about Ravenous from 1999. To answer your question, it was set in 1847 during the Mexican-American War, or like right after that, at least for our characters. Directed by Antonia Bird, written by Ted Griffin, starring Guy Pearce, Robert Carlyle, David Arquette. But yes, supporting roles from Jeremy Davies, Jeffrey Jones, John Spencer's last movie, Neil McDonough, and oddly enough, Stephen Spinella, who was just in Virtuosity, which was the last movie I recorded on. So it's always funny to see those character actors like pop up in movie after movie.
Yeah.
But do you remember the first time that you saw Ravenous?
Yeah, I think that it was my wife, my now wife, I had just changed teaching jobs I've only moved from one school to another once, and I've been at this school now for 24 years, but we were just dating at the time and living in sin. So we we moved into this house way in the country. We only lived there for 9 months when I was starting this new teaching gig. We didn't have cable. And so we just watched a lot of VHS and DVD during that time. And I got to see so many wonderful movies during that time, and Ravenous was one of them. So this would have been probably 2002 maybe that and I don't know if I was aware of Ravenous before that, but I know that when she saw it with me, and then when it really like got its tenterhooks into me, was around that time. And I actually began to use it I teach film, among other things. I started to use it in class, and have many years used it for mainly for time expansion, because it does. There's a scene I'm sure we'll get to, a sequence involving a cave, and it is one of the most intense sequences I've ever seen. And the way that Antonia Bird, she's so like, this is so well directed and so well edited. I didn't look up the editor, and I should have done that, but it does such interesting things with time. You're talking about the comedic aspects of it. They're just so organic, and the movie is just so sure of what it is. Like, to be able to pull off its specific type of humor and keep it so kind of tonally perfect throughout the film. Like for me, it's difficult to describe the kind of humor. Gallows humor is probably the best description, but to be able to sustain that without winking at the audience too much, and without departing completely from the horrific elements, of which there are many, it manages to inhabit this really disturbing yet kind of darkly funny space that few films do.
Yeah, like even the ones where I'm thinking of, oh, what would be a movie that's like I could even recommend to make somebody watch Ravenous, and the one I'm thinking of is like much darker, much darker, and doesn't have the kind of lightness that this one does at all. But Neil Farrell was the editor for this film.
Okay.
But to what you said about Antonia Bird, there's an interview with Robert Carlyle, and I'm going to put the link for that interview into the show notes when I do this. But he's talking about working with her because it was his friend who, like, that was the connection that got her the job. And he said that, like, she really basically had like a week to prepare for the film. And yeah, we're going to get to that a little bit later, but there was drama behind the scenes that led to her coming in. There was a hiatus in filming, and then during that hiatus, she's brought in, and then she basically had a week to get back and prepare. And he mentions her ability to suspend time. So to your point, like, there is this long sequence that comes from that moment where, like, the reveal happens at the cave, and like you feel like you're just stuck in a weird bubble in the way that Robert Carlyle is like twitching, and he's really making people uncomfortable. He makes you uncomfortable. That's one of the things I always remembered from this movie, was the like he's like panting like a dog. It's getting really intense, and you kind of don't know what's going to happen. The other guy's freaking out. He's screaming for his friends in the cave. That whole sequence really, I don't even know how long it is. Maybe it's like half an hour. It's tough to tell, but you get also this like kind of really intense tumbling moment, like a really like intense physical stunt. And she said that she filmed most of that with the first unit, and then they did some second unit stuff, but she said it was like a 4-hour setup to capture that whole like falling through the trees and then rolling down the hill. And they're rolling down that hill for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of just like, it's otherworldly. And that's the best way I can put it, is like you sort of like feel disconnected from the reality that you're in, even though the movie is already sort of like disconnected from the reality that we're existing in, watching it in like the 2000s era. So funny that you pointed that out, because that was something that Carlyle like was very complimentary about her. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I assume we'll talk about Carlyle more soon too. Oh my gosh.
We will. This is probably my favorite role of his. And it's like, I had known about him from the Full Monty, and I had seen the Full Monty, but this is always the movie that I think about when I think about him. And I think he's in 28 months later. No, the second one, 28
28
weeks
weeks
later.
later.
Yeah, he's very good in that as well. And
Incredible.
I mean, he's got a great career, honestly. But like when I
Yeah.
think of my favorite performances of him, I feel like this is always the one. And maybe that's because him and Antonia Bird were friends and they had worked together on a couple movies before this. So her working with the American cast was very different than her working with him. And he sort of described it as the working environment when they were making movies together was sort of like everybody's in a shared headspace and they kind of like almost automatically know what to do, versus working with a heavily American cast. Everyone's like waiting for their blocking and waiting for the opportunity to like do the thing that they're supposed to do in the scene. They're like, hey, what do we do? And so she goes to Robert and she's like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what you're supposed to do. And so Robert Carlyle was talking about his first scene in the movie is the one where, or the first scene that he shot is the one where he's outside the window and then they bring him in and they're giving him the bath and everything. And so, yeah, Antonia Bird's looking at it as sort of like a naturalistic moment where, yeah, this is what we're doing in the scene, just like figure it out. And all the actors wanted like their very specific blocks of like, okay, no, you got to go here and then you get the cup and then you bring it back. And like, so it was just like a kind of weird working environment. But the fact that like she was able to do it and while stepping in is also very impressive.
Absolutely, it is. I can't believe. I mean, it's just astonishing to me that that's how that came about. It looks like it was so planned out. It looks like it was so executed to plan. It's just extraordinary that she only had a week. That yeah. Just let me throw these things out here really fast.
Mhm.
For me, this is a top 25 horror movie of all time.
Oh, yeah.
For me, the sequence, I look at it as, I know it's two different sequences and scenes, but between the embedded narrative where Robert Carlyle tells the story to the group, accompanied by that exquisite music, and then the scene in the cave. Like I look at those as a piece, just
Yeah.
narratively, not cinematically, I realize, but narratively, those things are to me like this kind of opera, that's all put together. That sequence is one of my top 10 favorite sequences in all of horror. And the story that he tells once he's the face that they see outside the window when they bring him in, as you were talking about, I guess the first scene he shot, what? But that embedded narrative, that story that he tells, for me, that's up there with like Quint and the USS Indianapolis. Like it is up there with the best embedded narratives in any film ever. Like the writing is marvelous, the editing is next level, the music is so intense, the reaction shots are so perfect because when he's talking, something he says connects to almost every character. You cut to Guy Pearce, of course, the most because he's your protagonist. But when we cut to Jeremy Davies, something about religion was mentioned. When we cut to Neil McDonough, something about being a soldier was mentioned. When we cut to Jeffrey Jones, I forget what it was, but I think there was even some foreshadowing with his character. And most of all, the bedrock on which that whole scene is built is Robert Carlyle's acting. It is such an actor's moment. And his delivery is, to me, just awe-inspiring. And so when I think of him in this movie, I think of like Toni Collette in Hereditary. Like I think of like a legendary horror performance. Like I can't believe how good Robert Carlyle is in this movie.
Agreed. I mean, watching it again last night, I think I think the first time I watched it, it was like I didn't know who Guy Pearce was. So I'm like learning who Guy Pearce is, seeing some familiar faces, and I'm like, oh, Guy Pearce is really impressive. But watching it again, sort of like detached from all of that, is like Robert Carlyle is in fact amazing. The movie just came and went so quietly at the time that it kind of gets overlooked. But I think to your point, like it is a fantastic horror performance because he has to do so much. I mean, we meet him and he's like a scraggly person. Like he's covered in like rags and dirt, almost dying.
Yeah.
But as soon as like he gets bathed and gets warm, like you kind of get to see a little bit more of the personality. And then like by the time that we get to the end of the film and he's in full like military garb, his mustache is much more manicured, his hair is slicked back. He's like in full control, fully confident, like the charisma is off the charts. Yeah, just a wild performance from him. And you really get to see so much of his range all inside of one movie. But you said something that I want to ask you about before I forget. And you were talking about like embedded narratives, right? And so you're a writer. We've got a character in the lead in Guy Pearce who's a coward, right? And so that's like a challenging place to write your protagonist from, especially when he himself is like very much aware and accountable for his cowardice. They ask him at one point, like when he holds the medal in his hand, oh, what'd you get the medal for? And he says cowardice, right? And so to have him and Robert Carlyle opposite each other, from your perspective as a writer, I want to know, like, how challenging is it to write a character that is sort of like not heroic to be the hero, and then from the perspective of writing the villain, like it's obviously probably a lot of fun to write a charismatic villain, but like how do you develop that arc from the inception of us meeting Robert Carlyle to the point where like he's fully confident and charming, and like I kind of just like want him to be the lead at that point. He kind of almost is too.
Yeah. You talk about his evolution in the movie. It's incredible. This is a little embarrassing, but you know how certain moments in film will imprint themselves on you, that just stick with you and kind of haunt you. And there's a writer named Gary Braunbeck, really good horror writer. But I remember hearing, I think he was the one, but he talked about how he characterizes his characters, and he always imagines them either how they put on or take off their jacket and how they eat a bowl of cereal. And by starting with those very mundane details, he said there are infinite iterations of how you can do those things and how people express themselves in those small details. One small detail in Robert Carlyle's performance that still sticks with me every time I wear a shirt with buttons, like a dress shirt. There's a moment where he is either dressing or undressing, because Guy Pearce, basically tries to charge him for all the terrible things he's done.
Yes.
And so Carlyle has to like undress and then dress again, I think on camera. I always imagine myself as Robert Carlyle when I'm manipulating the buttons, and I'm not and I'm not doing it like as a fanboy. It's just my mind, like the charismatic, magnetic, interesting way that he buttons stuck in my head. Like that's how nuanced his performance is. Just his gestures, his body language, his facial expressions as he does it. So every time I put on a dress shirt for school or unbutton it at the end of the day, my mind goes back to Ravenous, which is really kind of either strange or cool or both. Yeah. So Guy Pearce, his performance, I remember the first minute, because I was obsessed with this movie back in my 30s. And I remember just being really frustrated with his character because he's quiet and stoic at times where you want him to be expressive. He's sometimes cowardly when you want him to be heroic. And I think, who did you say wrote the screenplay? Ted something? Is that who?
Yeah, it was Ted Griffin, and he had like been working on it. I forgot the book that he mentioned reading, but he was reading a book, and there's an aside in the book about who was the Colorado cannibal. And then that became like the basis for like, hey, there's a movie in there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so for both the writer Ted Griffin and then Guy Pearce the actor, I feel like what they did with that character, with the lead character, was very bold and courageous, as weird as that sounds, because it's courageous to make the character uncourageous.
Yeah.
Because there are so many like it's we say we want a character, we say we want people to be vulnerable, but it's difficult in life to actually be vulnerable. We say we want our characters to be vulnerable, but it's difficult for them to be vulnerable. It's difficult for the writer to be vulnerable on the page. It's difficult to be totally honest on the page. Like, we would all wish that we would perform heroically in a difficult situation, but we all know, I think, that every person has the capacity to sink or swim, to fight or flee, to it depends on the person, depends on the situation. And Guy Pearce doesn't do anything in the movie, either well or poorly, that is out of the realm of believability. And I think that his performance, to be able to essay cowardice so effectively, is a real risk and shows a lot of vulnerability. And for the writer to write him that way, I remember I wrote a novel called Dust Devils. It's a vampire western, actually, and I made my character somebody who had had moments of cowardice early, and he grows into a greater stature over the course of the story. I don't think I was thinking of Guy Pearce's character when I wrote it, but now that I think about it, there are some similarities. And I remember reading this review early on, back when I would read a lot of reviews, and I finally learned not to do that because it's just horrible for your mental health. But the review started out like the bolded title was "Cowardly Cody," and it was basically like, I give this book like a kind of a middling to semi-positive recommendation, but not fully, because the protagonist was too cowardly. And I remember really kind of being stung by that. And I think that, any writer who does that runs the risk of that. I think because it's very easy for people in a non-dangerous situation to point fingers and say to that character, "Oh, you're such a wimp, you're such a loser." But to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't even matter. Like, with the most heroic of characters or people, they could have moments of fear or frailty or weakness too. And so to be willing to lean into that in creating that character, I think that's what makes the final moments of Ravenous so satisfying, because Guy Pearce shows some real ferocity by the end of that movie, and that would not be nearly as impactful had he begun in a different place. So because he is basically laid low, he's basically at his weakest point when we meet him, and for much of the first half of the movie, I think that that's why the movie really, really goes up a notch dramatically when he grows.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a full line of dialogue for 25 straight minutes in the film. Like, we see him barf and he kind of like looking around, but he's doing so much without actually saying anything. And, so many people are sort of speaking for him. And I think that also acts as a very good vehicle to sort of inform us of like just how deep that cowardice runs. Like, he's afraid to speak up in the setting of it's not a court martial, but like as they're investigating what happened, he's afraid to speak up at the table when he's being served like meat that he doesn't want to eat. He's afraid to speak up when he gets basically to Fort Spencer, right? So there's so many things where it's like he's just like afraid to sort of like do anything, but he's happy to be alive. And I guess like one of the details I never really latched onto the first handful of times watching it was that he was trapped at the bottom of that, cart full of dead bodies.
Mhm.
And he says, my commanding officer or my captain, like his head was blown off and basically like blood was running down his throat.
Yeah.
And in that is where he got the strength to then overcome, that entire pile of bodies, which would have been incredibly difficult to climb out of, and then like siege the entire enemy fort at that point. And so I started piecing that together. And so like he knows something changed. There's even a line of dialogue where he acknowledges like something felt different. And
Yeah.
so he's sort of like afraid to investigate that own aspect of him. So like he's scared of himself as well.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really kind of like this really dark but beautiful like soliloquy on his view of himself by the time that we get to the end of the movie, because it's like he doesn't necessarily have to overcome the cowardice of all these other things, but he has to like face himself. And he asks the character Martha when he's injured, and he's like begging her, like, how do you stop this? And she says, you have to like give yourself to it. That's the only way to stop it. And so in a moment of self-sacrifice, after playing dead to survive, to then self-sacrifice is a really like just nice way to close out his story.
Yeah, I agree. That's a wonderfully stated description of his arc. There's also a great, I hadn't even thought about it because I had thought about his self-loathing, but I hadn't thought about how much he was frightened of that aspect of himself. But you're right. It's very true. And I think that a scene that maybe gives us a visualization of that, because you have moments, it's silly connection here, but Willem Dafoe and his internal conflict with the Green Goblin in the Spider-Man movies, like he's very clearly unnerved and unwilling to embrace that part of himself that becomes this other thing. And when Guy Pearce, you talked about that stunt where they have this long tumble through the wilderness, and they end up, he and another character who's he thinks is dead at first, end up in this cave, or in this little whatever, this underground like hole basically, and the character is dangling upside down, and then the character like almost reanimates and starts to strangle Guy Pearce. That feels largely like a confrontation with himself.
Yeah.
And then when he after that character dies, and they've been together, he's been with this corpse in this hole for a period of time. He talks to that, like yells at that corpse, and before he starts to eat from the corpse. And I think again, you could really easily read into that, this confrontation with self, this struggle with self, with accepting it, with denying it, knowing he has to do this and being afraid to do this, and what it means, what it says about himself to actually give into this. I think that's a really interesting moment.
Yeah, his survival instincts that he doesn't even want to acknowledge,
Yeah.
like they're there, and he has to embrace that in that moment. And as small of a detail as it is, that little moment where he cuts into like his leg and he's
Yes.
fishing for that piece of flesh was one of like the visuals that has stuck with me for 25 years, because it's not the most gruesome thing in the movie, but for that character in that moment to be willing to take that chance, it is pretty nasty. And it's not even as bad as I thought. Like it cuts away before it gets like really bad, but like you just see enough and I'm like, ugh, that's I know he's about to eat that little piece of leg jerky, and it gives me the creeps. But let's take a look at the tail of the tape here, because we got to find out why we're talking about this movie in the context of a bad movie. So I think in the 2 years that we've sort of had this on the agenda, maybe it entered reappraisal territory slightly, because it has an IMDb score of 6.9, healthy. Metascore of 46, though. Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 52, but an audience score of 78, Letterboxd of 3.7, a Google users thumbs up rating of 76%. But at the time of its release, it had a cinema score of a D, which gives us a Bad Movies We Love total score of 65 out of 100. So it's kind of in that territory where it's probably beginning to be accepted as an actual good movie as more and more people see it. But at the time, the critics were not happy about this. I think if you go into it looking at it like a horror movie, you're probably not going to be super happy with it. If you're going into it looking at it as like a frontier Western, probably not going to be super happy about that either. So it kind of like, it landed right between so many different styles of movies that people were accustomed to, that when you watch this, it's hard to be like, oh, this is a cannibal horror film, because the character, like Robert Carlyle, is having so much fun. It doesn't really feel like folk horror in that way either. It doesn't necessarily feel fully like a Western, because they're not even moving. They're kind of just like in one place. So it feels more like period anchored than it does in terms of a Western that feels a little bit more open and a little bit more on the side of maybe like frontier adventure. Because there's not much adventure in this movie. There's like one major sort of march that they go on. And then a lot of the backstory that's getting told is about this adventure that happened, which would also be a very interesting story if that was like put pen to paper and make a script out of that as well. So yeah, I can't help but love this movie because it's so weird. And even at the time, I was like, I don't know what it is I like about it, but there's just I can't get it out of my head. And it was one of those movies that I had to show everybody that I knew. And I still have the VHS. It's in storage right now. I don't have a VCR, but I kept the VHS for all these years. And yeah, the poster has always been something that really like stood out as like this freaky thing. There's been a lot of posters since then, but just like the screaming mouth with all of like the faces and the flesh in the background. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's super cool. It's very unique within all of the genres that it operates in. But there is something I want to ask you in terms of themes for this, because this movie has a lot when it comes to like its thematic presentation of stuff. And I think the reason that maybe it feels disconnected from all of the genres that would maybe be the most familiar is that the movie sort of uses its period setting and its placement and the act of cannibalism as a critique of like manifest destiny. And we have a moment where Robert Carlyle speaks about manifest destiny, and his character being European has a much different outlook on it. And I think it's also like speaking about colonialism and capitalism. And the director, Antonia Bird, said, as a European observing early California history and making a film about that, I kind of believe Europeans were responsible for a lot of the stuff that happened here. Carlyle's character represents that. The Europeans practiced genocide. And I think the good things about America, we are not responsible for. So she has this outlook, and especially as a UK director, like telling this story, I think it leans into Carlyle more, which I think is honestly like a strength. It is a good thing. But how do you feel like in terms of the thematic presentation of the film, that it handles all of these different ideas and like puts that out there in a way that a lot of horror movies like are not handling these kinds of questions?
I think that it confronts a really uncomfortable truth. So it's funny. Right now, I always read several books at once, and one book I'm reading right now is called Congo by Michael Crichton.
Oh, yeah.
And it's my first Michael Crichton book, and it's good. It's good. I'm enjoying it, but it talks about cannibalism in it, and it talks about how the perception of cannibalism varies from place to place. And I think most people, at least most people in my experience, obviously I live where I live, and so that's my experience. Cannibalism is so horrifying, it's so taboo that it's like it almost short circuits the mind. Like it just shatters our everything we think to be true about reality is like threatened by how horrific the notion of cannibalism is. And is it George, the Native American character? Is that his name?
Yes.
He at one point says to Jeffrey Jones, I think, that man eats the body of Christ all the
Sunday,
time,
yeah.
right? Every Sunday. And so at the heart of that religion is this ritual. And yet I think his point is that maybe it's something, cannibalism is something that, and obviously I'm not equating, the actual physical eating of a human body with that ritual, but the idea of eating a human, right, is something that it's so assumed that humans would never do, that it's like that's a comfortable truth that we all kind of can agree on. Like that's just something you would never do. It's so taboo. But yet, like he points out that there's an example of it that is like commonly discussed, but nobody really, at least for me, I guess the point that he seems to be making is, this isn't as distant of
Yes.
of a fact or a possibility than how you're kind of behaving. That you're acting like the Europeans or Americans would never, would never, or in this case, the white man would never do such a thing. But as Antonia Bird points out, like during Manifest Destiny, during Westward Expansion, the behavior of humankind was so horrific, and it's I think that we collectively, societally, kind of look away from that period in our history, because to look at it would be really, really uncomfortable when we start to acknowledge that, the fact that, we're told the story of the Europeans coming over on, on boats and making a new life. But then it's almost like we have this ellipsis, this fade to black, and then dot, 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 and here we are. And that's not how it happened. It happened through extermination. It happened through genocide. It happened through atrocity. And so the fact that Robert Carlyle's character, I think, is the embodiment of what happened in that ellipsis, what happened during that fade to black, I think that's really uncomfortable. But I think it's something that maybe the movie wants us to acknowledge and understand. This sort of thing happened. And obviously I'm not saying that every European settler and everybody in Westward Expansion, I'm not saying they all ate their victims, but they committed genocide. They murdered people. They murdered. That's one reason why I love 3:10 to Yuma. There's the Christian Bale, Russell Crowe movie. Russell Crowe mentions how the Pinkertons shot and killed and murdered Apache women and children. And the Byron McElroy, Peter Fonda character is like, not a soul taken didn't deserve what he got. And it's like, and the movie invites us to like pause and like, wait a minute, what? What do you mean? They deserved, children deserved to be murdered and pushed into a ditch? Because that's what we did. That's what people did. And so Carlyle, his blithe, smiling, ghoulish enjoyment of tracking people down and killing them, I think that reflects history. It's a metaphor for history, not necessarily literal history, but a metaphor for all the things. And I think that's why he talks about Manifest Destiny, right? So I think that the movie does such a good job at pointing out our willful, ignorance of our history and the way things actually went down. And it does it in a really kind of artful way. It's kind of an aggressive way sometimes, but also in an artful way that really makes the point. And on top of all the other reasons why you talked about why people didn't respond well to this movie, I wonder if subconsciously, that's another reason why. I wonder if people were like bothered by it and didn't know why they were bothered by it.
And I think if you look at other sort of maybe contemporary Westerns of the time too, there's always been a glorification of the Wild Wild West, right? Like, even though it's like, sure, everybody's got guns, we're shooting each other, saloons, whatever. There was always kind of like a sexiness and an appeal to it. And the fact that like a lone gunslinger could just go into town, and as long as his moral compass is aimed in the right direction, he can make a difference and like find his fortune and his wife. And so there was always like a sort of intoxication with that idea. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I like Westerns, is because it really dabbles in that. But the older I've gotten, the more I like think of like, yeah, it was probably like really dirty and really scary and much, much worse than it is depicted on film. But the bit of dialogue you mentioned that is read by Joseph Running Fox in the film, I think it's an important distinction to have it be coming from that character, because you have the white men in this situation looking at, this tapestry, or like, I think it's probably leather, but it is the Wendigo, and he's explaining that to them, and Jeffrey Jones is translating. And so for George to then speak to Jeffrey Jones, and the way that Jeffrey Jones receives it, I think is different than the way that George intends it.
Yeah.
Because that's the point that you're making, is that, they're looking at it as, oh, this is this act of savagery
Yes.
that these natives like embark in. They believe in this like hocus pocus. And then, you know, you have George is like, well, the white man eats the body of Christ every Sunday. And so Jones receives that as kind of like, oh, like a tongue-in-cheek sort of acknowledgement. But I think what you get actually out of George's interaction is that the Wendigo and the cannibalism and the mythology behind that is that, like, by eating the body, you're absorbing the soul of the other person. And so it does have like this very strong like religious connotation to it that I think he recognizes, and they kind of blow off. You know, like they look at it like, oh, this is beneath us and this is just like this legend. But it's like, yeah, every Sunday you're going to church and like partaking in the exact same legend, and you don't think it to be strange at all. And so I think it is very important to have it be coming from that character in terms of context. But Antonia Bird, when she was talking about sort of like thematic imagery and the film, what she says is the metaphor of power and society where we're encouraged to be competitive is, to me, not a great society. So cannibalism can be seen as a critique of contemporary America, where the way of life seems to be more and more a matter of consume or be consumed.
Yes.
She also said that cannibalism can be interpreted as an addiction or a yearning for this like eternal youth, which manifests in modern day Western society as the consumption of junk food or obsession with plastic surgery. And so what she says is Robert Carlyle's character is the ultimate drug pusher and Guy Pearce is the ultimate junkie.
That's marvelous. I especially like the first half. I'm not disputing the second half of what she said, but the first half of that is, I mean, it is the purest, most disturbing iteration we can imagine of I'm going to take what I want, to your detriment, to my benefit. You know, and in this instance, it means I'm going to eat you. I'm going to kill and eat you. And there's a wonderful moment on this cliffside where Guy Pearce has this precipitous drop at his back, and he thinks he's murdered Robert Carlyle, but Robert Carlyle sits up like Michael Myers and he's so good. But by the way, the one performance that I love, this is my favorite Carlyle performance, but another one you've probably seen is where he plays Begbie in Trainspotting. And he can be scary. Like, I remember he scared me as Begbie in Trainspotting. He like unnerved me with his gleeful malice. He was just frightening to me. And in that moment where Guy Pearce is cornered, has nowhere to go, and Carlyle is like toying with him, enjoying trapping him and running from side to side so Guy Pearce can't get away. It's like this ultimate moment where Guy Pearce's weakness is foregrounded in this moment of Robert Carlyle's absolutely insatiable, implacable insistence on taking what he wants to somebody else's detriment. It's never clearer than in that moment. And it's like, it's so simple, but it's so like elemental and primal. I love that moment, and I'm disturbed by it.
Yeah. I mean, he scares him so much that his option was like jump off a sheer cliff face and go, if I die, I die, but I'm not going to get eaten by this dude.
You believe him doing it though.
Yeah.
Like it's not one of those moments in a horror movie like, oh, let's split up and you roll your eyes at the characters so they go their separate ways. We're like, yeah, I could see that. You know, you've got a 20% chance to live if you jump. You've got a 0% chance to live if you stay up here with this guy, because we've seen what he can do already. So I think it's like, for me, I'm like, yep, good call, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely well earned, I think, for Guy Pearce in that moment, and we believe it. I'm gonna take a moment now. We're just gonna set the table for the audience. I mean, we're a little long in the tooth in terms of details, but who cares? It's my show. If you're listening, you know the drill. Like, we just get carried away. But anyway. Ravenous began as a hot script by Ted Griffin, who sold 3 screenplays to studios in a single week, which is loosely inspired by real-life American cannibalism legends, including the Donner Party and prospector Alfred Packer. Filming took place in the Tatra Mountains of Slovakia and in Durango, Mexico, but the production quickly became troubled. Creative clashes erupted between the director and the studio, with complaints of micromanagement, constant notes, and ongoing script rewrites during the shoot. In post-production, Antonia Bird said elements like voiceover narration and explanatory quotes were added without her approval, choices she felt weakened the final cut. Ravenous was released in March of 1999, opening in just over 1,000 U.S. theaters, with a UK release later in the year. The film struggled commercially, earning just over $1 million on its opening weekend, a little more than $2 million in North America, failing to recoup its $12 million budget. Despite the failure, though, Ravenous later found a cult following through home video and got a special Blu-ray release from Scream Factory. And I think, looking at it now, it's easy to see that it has sort of gained popularity. There's actually a YouTube video that I started watching. I didn't get a chance to finish it, though, but the whole thing is like a video essay on why Ravenous is the greatest film ever made. And I think it's beautiful that someone took the time to do a video essay, but there's also a lot of articles that came out around the 25th anniversary as well. And in one of them, they're talking to Ted Griffin and asking him about the story. And he said, "My feelings about the final version of Ravenous are mostly positive. That it exists at all is a miracle. It was an odd bird for a studio to make and for talent to sign up for. I'm proud of that and grateful. Was it compromised? Absolutely. Then again, every movie ever made is a compromise of sorts. There's stuff I really loved in the script that got cut or diminished, either by the first director or the necessities of patching the movie together after his departure. But that's also stuff there's also stuff as a result of him and as a result of the craziness attendant to his dismissal, which I love. So it's a trade-off. I'm very proud of it. It's not exactly what I had in mind when I started, but its oddness, I realize, is a feature, not a glitch."
Yeah. Wow. I don't know who the first director was. I don't know if that. Yeah, that's fascinating to me. I've always seen Antonia Bird as the director. I never had any inkling that she was a relief pitcher.
Right.
Wow, she must have really come through, because this what we have. You just never guess. Like, I think that's one of the most, I think, remarkable parts about art, is that we always watch, like with Jaws is a quintessential example. Like, you think, oh, this is so efficient and so perfectly planned and plotted and filmed, and it was disastrous on set. It was difficult. It was almost shut down multiple times, and I guess that's maybe why editing is so important, is because sometimes things can be saved or enhanced in the edit. And I think this movie is so well edited. Like, I think that's a big part of why it works. But obviously, you got to have that footage in the first place. So Antonia Bird and maybe the original director. I don't know. I don't know what footage exists from him.
Yeah.
But dang, the result is awesome.
Well, to her credit, as much of a challenge as it was at first, I think it opened the door for the movie to change a little bit, in the sense that, the actors were very rigidly wanting instruction on what they're supposed to do. And that was not her working style. But then, the final fight scene in the movie was basically just made up by Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle, because the original script had them fighting on the rooftops of the cabins as everything's on fire. And they decided to do this other thing. And it says that during the production, the crew ran out of fake blood because they just had a stab fight, for however long that goes on. So it's kind of cool to see that, by the end, it ended up being a work where it became more collaborative, and there wasn't this insistence upon, hey, let's make sure that you tell us exactly what we're doing, and there's no wiggle room there.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the synopsis haikus?
Well, it's a haiku.
It's a haiku.
So Ravenous. Calhoun lives to eat. Boyd eats to live but must change. Together they feast.
Ooh, that's pretty good. That's better than mine, I think. So, all right. Well,
you wrote one too?
Well, of course, I always write one just in case the guest doesn't. But also, I don't want to make you feel like you're out there on a limb by yourself. Okay. So when the weather turns, man's hunger consumes us all. You are what you eat. Or you are who you eat, I should say.
Who you eat. I dig it. I dig that.
So for the people listening and the people who are maybe questioning why we're talking about this movie at all, why would you suspect that critics didn't like this movie at the time? Why did it have a bad reputation at all?
I think people, I think critics, well, there are a couple things. One, oh boy, this actually, the more I think about, there's a lot to unpack. So let me try to take it in splinters. One splinter is that there will always be a subsection of audience members and critics who frown at horror, who look down at horror. And then especially when you have something visceral, they're going to assume that it's just splatter and cheap scares and no substance at all. The moment you mention cannibal, like those dismissive tendencies, I think really kick in. So I think there are probably quite a few viewers who are predisposed to hating it just reading the synopsis, just reading the description. Then you have the resistance to a story that defies conventions, that does its own thing. Often stories like that take a while for people to appreciate, like a truly unique story. This is like you're saying, like you're trying to figure out another dark comedy horror that's like this. I mean, I'm sure if you gave us both an hour, we'd come up with some titles, some comps. But the fact that it's difficult, both of us pretty seasoned movie watchers and movie goers, I mean, we can both name horror comedies, but it's like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. No, that's way sillier than this.
Yeah.
Low budget like Psycho Gorman or Slacks. No, not tonally like that at all. And the more you think of horror comedy, like Deadstream, the more you start to think of horror comedies, the more you're like, I mean, it's maybe 10% like this or 15% like that, but it's its own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that when people receive something truly unique and new and interesting, I think that there's also this tendency to reject that, because in espousing an opinion, there's vulnerability. And so when you espouse an opinion that you suspect is not going to be universally accepted, I think that people tend to automatically temper that enthusiasm. They automatically feel like they have to qualify their praise, and dial it down so as not to be derided by others. So I think that probably many who maybe enjoyed this movie felt like they shouldn't have, felt like, oh, I'm kind of out on the ledge by myself here, so I'm going to dial it back a little bit and give it kind of a middling, a mediocre recommendation. And I think that the fact is this movie is really weird and really different, but it is, I think, is just outstanding. And I think that it's not, we would tell our friends this, but it's a difficult thing to get on the internet and write, hey, this twisted, bloody cannibal comedy that's a critique of, that's a satire of manifest destiny. Just even those sentences, like to be able to say that, you're out on a limb. But it feels like, as you're kind of talking about, it feels like over time people are kind of willing to see it for what it is, which is just pure awesomeness. Like it is a kick-ass movie. It really is.
Yeah, those sentences would be like, no studio exec is touching this with a 10-foot pole in this, economy of filmmaking right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's so weird and so out there. I mean, I'm glad that at least Ted Griffin acknowledged that. He's like, even for the time, I'm surprised this movie got made at all, because the fact that a studio was willing to like get behind this and think it was a good idea is insane.
Here's the constant, and we know this, the constant struggle in entertainment, in artistic endeavors, is between art and commerce.
Yeah.
Right. Always a struggle between something that's profitable and something that's good. Sometimes they overlap, but often they don't. Like there are movies that have grossed $1 billion that suck. There are movies that have barely even made back 10% of their budgets or whatever this made back that are wonderful. But I think this is a case of art. This movie is art. You know what else is art? We've barely even spoken about it, is the score. Like the music for this, I was obsessed with the score. I was obsessed with the score for a long time. And last night, listening to it again as I rewatched part of the movie, it was like meeting old friends. Like I could not believe how nuanced and varied. And the score even has humor. Like it has a sense
Yes,
of humor.
absolutely.
But it also has the willingness to play it totally straight and say, this is scary in this moment. This is terrifying. And it's just such a varied score tonally, kind of like the movie is varied tonally. It really is inextricable from the film. Like it's so much a part of the tapestry of the film, in a way that few scores are. Like you can't another weird analogy is like Interstellar. Like the score of Interstellar, like when you think of that movie, you hear Hans Zimmer's music. And when I think of this movie, I hear Nyman, or what are the names? Damon something and
Yeah, it is Michael Nyman, and I wrote it down.
Damon.
Michael Nyman and Damon Albarn.
It is a top horror score. It's an amazing piece of music. Yeah.
And I think what I actually really like about the score itself is that they both kind of like split it. So it's a joint composition where they're not like collaborating on the individual works. It's like you're going to
Really?
do this and then you're going to do this. So that's why we have those like the background music when Carlyle is telling the score, they're setting the trap, right? Like you have these moments where like the music is intensifying, and then you have like the other moments, and I think Carlyle even speaks to this. There's a scene where like Guy Pearce is walking through the snow and he's walking out the front gate, and it's sort of like a pluckier type of music. It's a little bit more lifted, and the music probably to me was the biggest cue that the movie knows that it is comedic. Like some of the music choices in certain moments are very much like, oh, this movie knows that it's sort of like taking the piss here and like letting that out. And maybe I didn't pick up on it that much the first time, and it was like that was probably the hardest thing to grapple with. But I think just watching it back last night, I'm like, oh yeah, completely a comedy when it wants to be. Like otherwise you don't make these types of choices. But Michael Nyman also founded Foster Social Orchestra, which performs in the film. And that group was founded as artists attempting to create postmodern avant-garde sound by having artists with a background other than music perform the works of Stephen Foster in an untrained but inspired way. So you're still like, you're taking something that is well known, but then you're like deconstructing it and like reassembling it with a different approach. And I think that sort of like speaks volumes about like what the movie generally is kind of willing to do. It's taking all these familiar things, it's deconstructing it in a way that is going to like piss off a lot of people and make it seem disjointed. But then when you put it back together, like it actually works. It's just doesn't work in a way that I think we were accustomed to at the time. So it's a little jarring because it doesn't fit neatly into any of the boxes that we want to put it into.
Beautifully said. I didn't know all that, but that is so in keeping with my thoughts on the score. And something else occurred to me. We talked about why people didn't respond to this movie. I guarantee this movie had some walkouts.
Yeah.
Of the few people that actually attended this movie, I guarantee there are some people who gasped and walked out. Specifically, there's a moment where Robert Carlyle, kind of in this virtuoso sequence that we're talking about involving the cave and then outside the cave, where he is getting ready to eat somebody, and this other character is watching in horror, and he says something like, "Run."
Yeah.
And then this music starts in.
Yeah.
It's just so funny. You feel like you're at some fiddler festival, you know, and people in period garb and everybody's dancing around. And I guarantee you, like, that was horrifying. Like, I mean, it's to us, it's horrifying in the best possible way and hilarious in the best possible way. But I guarantee you, there are some who are offended by that, like the "well, I never" pearl clutching crowd, who are just out, like because the movie does play that as, and it's hilarious in the worst possible way. I guarantee you, there are people who fled for the exits in that scene.
Oh, absolutely. Because you go from sort of like this stalking, sort of like this billowing background music that is leading to this confrontation that we know is coming. We know something's happening because the music cue is like it's getting more and more intense. It's coming. And then once it hits, it's like, oh wow, that is intense. And then it switches and it's like Benny Hill, and it's like, oh, what is happening here? He's trying to eat this guy. And so I think that is like, it's what the movie really, I think, loves doing, maybe more than anything, is subverting our expectations in those moments and taking something that is kind of hard, like cannibalism, and something that sort of is a non-starter for a lot of people, and being like, how do we soften this, and how do we have a moment of levity in the middle of it? And like Guy Pearce was talking about that too in one of the press interviews, saying that like, yeah, you kind of like need it in a movie like this, or else it's just like it's just eating people all the time. So let's take a look back at the trailer, actually, from 1999 and see exactly how this movie was marketed back then. Before we get to the trailer, it is time for a quick commercial from the multiverse. Being a frontiersman is not for the timid. You walk for days on end, just hoping you're headed in the right direction. Plus, the winters are brutal, food is scarce, and even when you do eat, the first American toothbrush is still a decade away from its first patent. So while you may look, feel, and even smell like death, at least now you don't have to bear the shame of frontier breath thanks to Mountain Man mints. The freshest, most powerful mints this side of the Sierra Nevadas. Made with fresh mint plucked from the California hillside, carnauba wax, cane sugar, gum paste, and human bone powder. That doesn't sound right. Mountain Man mints are the most effective breath freshener on the frontier and helps remove any pieces of flesh that may be stuck in between your teeth. Because when a man smells the breath of another man, he may not gain his strength, but thanks to Mountain Man mints, he'll gain the strength to face another day on the frontier. Mountain Man mints, now available at the Fort Spencer Haberdashery. And now, back to the show.
I'm stealing myself here, man. I'm bracing for some voice of God narration here.
One of the things I know that for sure is in it is the not Martin McDonough, excuse me. What's his name?
Neil McDonough?
Neil McDonough, yes, thank you. Him like doing his cold bath in the river and screaming like a maniac.
I love that part.
Yeah. It's like we have our soldier and you just watch him in the river. Ah!
We have 4 missing soldiers, Captain, and no bodies. We need a supportable explanation.
Captain John Boyd is about to discover
this music is
no one
great.
just ends up at Fort Spencer. We come for a reason.
Yours being?
Well, something he never imagined.
We have a great sense of camaraderie here at Fort Spencer.
It's this Indian scout told me a curious story.
Windigo. It's an old Indian myth from the north.
Man eats the flesh of another. He absorbs the other man's strength.
Now,
There
one
it is.
man must choose
We need others.
between having dinner
Not me.
and being dinner.
Not as much David Arquette as I expected in the trailer, to be honest.
A la Major Knox.
Guy Pearce,
I'm gonna kill him.
Robert Carlyle,
He was tough, but then a good soldier ought to be.
Jeffrey Jones,
I bring you into the fold.
What's wrong?
David Arquette,
There's no guilt. I gotta eat. It's tough making friends.
Eat to live. Don't live to eat. That was really sneaky.
That always stood out to me in the trailer. Always freaked me out.
I gotta say, that was almost a really, really good trailer. Almost. And it's one of those, I think we might have talked about this before, but it's one of those areas where, because I feel like there's quality in film in every era. There's also garbage in every era. But trailers are the one place where I think you can, and obviously special effects were better in 2010 than 1910, but whatever. The point is like trailers have demonstrably gotten better. And I think the main reason why is because the lack of voice of God in current trailers, because that's the only element of that doesn't work. Like every other, the voiceover from the characters, they chose some really cool lines. They chose some really cool images. They used the actual score. All of that works. All of that entices. All of that captures the tone of the movie. That all works really, really well. If that voice of God narrator just weren't part of it, Guy Pearce, Robert Carlyle. It's like, dude, come on, just let the trailer be, man. Let the story tell itself. You don't need to butt in. Like Good Will Hunting is one of my favorite movies, but that trailer is unwatchable because of the voice of God narration. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would still watch it again. I still remember sort of the "he was licking me" line reading as one of the things that was always the most frightening. And even that moment in the tents, I think it almost could be played much more humorously than it is, you know, because we see like in the dark, you can sort of see Carlyle like scared, and he's then saying like, oh, you know, I was having a nightmare. But like had they turned on the lights while like you actually see him doing it, and then he plays it off like, oh no, this wasn't intentional. That whole sequence where they take him outside and like they're like, hey, we're probably going to kill this guy out here, and he has to sort of diffuse the situation. He's both aware of his nature as a cannibal, but also like doesn't want to show his hand too quickly. So it's like it's a very elaborate ruse to get them all into the place where it's like, oh, the trap is now set here. And yeah, he plays every bit of it so well that even in the trailer, like his confidence comes through so well. Like he's like smoking the cigar outside, sort of shit talking that like, oh yeah, you know, that soldier that you were eating, you didn't finish him. But it's like he's tough, but like, you know, a good soldier should be tough. So it's like little stuff like that is like, yeah, he's having just so much fun that it's hard not to buy into it. So if nothing else, for people that are listening to this and maybe haven't seen Ravenous, like his performance alone is worth its weight in gold in this movie. And like, yeah, just check it out for him.
Absolutely. His acting, it's a masterclass, but his acting in the scene where they go to the cave and he's outside the cave. And it's that sequence, I'm telling you, man, that's one of the most intense sequences I've ever seen. And it's mainly because of how he acts. And those are all, you know, it's like we see something and it's fully expressed on screen. And it's hard to remember that those are all choices, right? Those are all choices. Every breath, every facial expression, every bit of body language that he does, like nobody like could have interpreted that the way that he did. And it's so bizarre. And it's so like when you see it unfolding, you have no idea what he's thinking or feeling. He just seems to be having an absolute mental break, like he's losing it. But then when you go back, then it all makes sense. And you're like, oh, wow. So this is what he's pretending to feel, but this is what he's actually feeling. This is what he's trying to exhibit with his body language, but this is what he's actually exhibiting. And it reminds me, like, I love moments like that where somebody is like they're playing two things at once that are diametrically opposed. Like that is so, I can't even imagine. I can't act, but as an actor, I can't imagine how tough that would be. There's a great moment, you know, we're right in the middle of this Stranger Things fever. Stranger Things, you know, culminates tomorrow night. But there's a great moment where Dacre Montgomery, the Billy actor, he in season 3 is basically speaking as the mind flayer, telling Elle that, you know, all of this is for you. We're going to destroy you. We're going to destroy all your friends. We're going to kill everybody. And he starts to weep, even though he's like grinning. His eyes become very glazed with tears. And that's because Billy is deep down in there, not wanting any of this to happen. And I feel like that was a really unique acting moment by that actor. And I feel like Carlyle, the whole first half of this, not even just the first half of the movie, even the second half of the movie, when the dramatic irony has us with the knowledge of what Guy Pearce knows, but the other people don't know what Guy Pearce and we know. So he's playing stuff for our benefit, for Guy Pearce's benefit, but stuff that could still be logically construed by all the other people present as something else. So he's constantly exhibiting contrasting traits simultaneously. Like that's next level acting. Like he is so good. He's just to watch him, as you're kind of saying, is enough of a reason to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's not like the sequence of the movie, but we talked about it a little earlier, the sort of interrogation with him and the other military leaders where they're asking to see his shoulder where he was shot.
Yes.
And it's like sort of this like quiet, like very seductive striptease in a lot of ways, because it's like he reveals the shoulder that he knows full well he was not shot in first. So there is like this dramatic tension of like, oh, is he shot in the other shoulder or not? And so then he like reveals the other shoulder and he's like pointing it around. The way like he looks at Guy Pearce in that, their whole interaction is a little romantic as well. And one of the interviewers asked him about that, like the homoeroticism in the movie, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "Ives doesn't just want to like eat Boyd, like he wants like all of him." And like I'm like, well, that makes sense. Like there's a reason he doesn't kill him. You know, he has so many opportunities to kill him, eat him, and he never does. He always wants to turn him. Right. And you have Jeffrey Jones at one point, like saying, you know, it's lonely as a cannibal. Like it's tough to make friends because you're going to eat everybody. So to know that part of it, and then for the movie to sort of end the way that it does with the both of them inside the bear trap, just like slowly dying. And he tells him like, well, if you die before me, I'm definitely going to eat you. But the question is like, if I die first, what are you going to do? And so for him to like have his full character arc and his redemption and sort of like facing his cowardice in that moment and to like die basically in his enemy's arms, I was just like, I don't know. It's kind of like it's a romantic ending, even though it's like very dark and very bloody and like they're cannibals. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. The first many times I saw the movie, that facet just like I didn't think of or consider. I did a little reading about the movie prior to this, not as much as I should have. I was a bad student. I should have done my homework more.
That's what I'm here for.
But I did. Yeah, no, exactly. You did that last time we were together, which is great. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm the group member that gets a good grade because of you. But no, I read like that. You know, talked about the homoerotic subtext in it, and I think it's definitely there. I think it's definitely there in the writing and the performance, and certainly there. So it's just like, I guess, another layer of the film, right? Another layer that is present in this movie. That's just another interesting way to read the movie.
Well, like in sort of reading that, hearing Carlyle speak about it, because it's like when I watched the ending, I was like, oh, that is really romantic. I wonder like if the entire like intent of their character arc together was kind of like this dark, evil romance. And then I'm thinking back to the scene where he jumps off the cliff, and like if you're the cannibal in that situation, it's like, well, he jumped off a cliff. He's going to be very difficult to find. But Carlyle, like, he's got dead bodies at the cave. He's got food. But he's like, nope, I'm going down there and I'm going to look for him. So I was like, he really always wanted, whether it be to eat him or to be eating people with him, he always was like very fixated on Boyd's character. And so that through line actually like does pay off more powerfully by the time you get to the end with that in mind. How do you feel about doing a little bit of trivia right now?
Sure.
Time for trivia.
Okay, so this was a question that popped up a little bit earlier about the director, but Antonia Bird ended up serving as the director, but she came in as a friend of Carlyle after the film's original director was sacked 2 weeks into production. Who was the original director?
I have no idea. I'd love to know, though.
It is Milcho Manchevsky. He did before the Rain, Dust, Shadows, movies I haven't seen. So the name wasn't super familiar to me, so that doesn't really help either of us. But after he was fired, Raja Gosnell was Fox's first choice for a replacement, but apparently the cast just like mutinied and they were like, no. Like this, we're not getting behind this. And that's when Carlyle reached out and was like, this is the person I think we should bring in. And then, everything turned out the way that it did. So I think all for the best.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. She killed it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so which one of our fine cannibal friends in this movie is a real life vegetarian?
Wow. Geez, I'm a Carlyle.
Surprisingly, it's actually Guy Pearce. And
Is he really?
Yeah, he has to play a lot of those scenes where he's like disgusted by the presence of meat. And during the filming, when he has to eat the Major Knox stew, that was a lamb stew that like craft services had provided. And so they would do the takes, he would eat into it, then they'd cut and he would spit it all out and they would take again. So like he all of this, probably the disgust that we see on his face throughout the film, where he's like confronted with the fact that he has to eat meat, is probably at least somewhat real.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gives that little bit of extra zhuzh to his performance.
That's awesome. They also the opening scene where he's eating whatever that is in that group with the
wettest prime rib I've ever seen.
And the reddest, like it's so vile looking, and they do such a good job of like making you feel his revulsion, and he does such a good job of showing. So I don't know why I didn't guess that, but that makes a lot of sense. Terrible.
Okay. So writer Ted Griffin and the original director Milcho Macheski wanted to cast which songwriter, singer / actor as Private Cleaves, but their choice was overwritten by Fox president Laura Ziskin, who hired David Arquette.
Man, I have no idea. I'm thinking of who would have been in his late 20s, early 30s about that time. I don't know.
Tom Waits.
Okay.
Which I think like actually fits with the rest of the cast and like the identity of the rest of the characters. But, Laura Ziskin was like, well, Scream. So get David Arquette in there. And I know that like those were notes coming from the studio too. Like you need more close-ups of David Arquette. It's like, no, I don't think we actually do. But thank you so much for sharing. All right. I've got one more, which little bit looser, maybe a little bit tougher. But when Ives is saying to Boyd, he says this quote, "Morality, the last bastion of a coward." He's paraphrasing which Italian author?
Was Machiavelli Italian?
He was, I think. But the author in question is Umberto Eco.
Oh, Name of the Rose.
Yeah, he said the quote is, "Someone said that patriotism is the last refuge of cowards," and it was basically like a commentary on the ambiguity of sort of right and wrong in an extreme situation. I think the quote goes on more so to say, specifically from Umberto, he's talking about patriotism is the last refuge of cowards, and often they wrap themselves in the flag and are also like super racist. I'm paraphrasing as well, but yeah, he says something like that. Okay, well that concludes like the actual official trivia section. I'm going to look here at the bonus trivia and see if there's anything else. There was I guess a version of this that was worse in terms of rating, and they had to cut it down to get to rated R. So wow. Yeah, the idea that there is a NC-17 version of this, I'm curious if it's just like more eating of people or more, because there's like some moments where you see like a body getting chopped up, but not so much. Like you see bloody skeletons, you see some stabbings and stuff, but I think like the dismemberment of Knox out in the open was probably like the most legitimately gruesome part of it.
There's a moment where I forget the character's name, but when he's the character that gets chased to that joyful fiddling music and of course gets killed. Toffler, when they come upon his body, like his entire like torso and belly, they're all opened up. I do wonder if maybe there was a little more there. Because it's like, yeah, I don't know. And it's hard to say though, because Antonia Bird does such interesting things with time that it could just be another example of that. How she suspended it long enough to let him eat that much while the other men, because it doesn't seem like they're chasing Robert Carlyle for that long, right? Maybe that's another bit of time manipulation on her part, or maybe it's a deleted scene where there was more feasting.
Yeah, I mean, even as a soldier, like Neil McDonough's character being like, "No, we're gonna go hunt him down." It's like, you guys don't know anything about these woods. You're in his environment. You just watch all your friends die. Like, you guys should get back to base. Honestly, like you saw Jeffrey Jones get stabbed, and he tells Boyd, "He's done. We can't do anything for him." And then it's like, "Yeah, you're right. Now, like, get out of there. Both of you need to leave." And instead, they chase the maniac into his wheelhouse. So kind of pay for it.
Yeah.
But we'll go over to the bonus wheel anyway, and we'll spin it a few times just for fun and see what kind of questions come off the wheel, because this is where like the silly hypothetical ones pop up, and we get to have a little bit more fun with. So, first one off the board: if there was a new version of this movie made today, which director would you like to see helm the project?
Well, I think I mean, you think of some of the new horror auteurs like Eggers is really at home in the period, kind of sensibility. You have the plot twisty of, is it Kreger?
Yeah.
The guy with weapons
Zach
and
Kreger,
Barbarian. Yeah, so that would be good as far as the twistiness of it. And then I was thinking Ari Aster. There's something about this movie that makes me feel a little bit of what I felt during Midsummer. I think any one of those three, because Ari Aster clearly is a director who will go there, who will do things that will unnerve an audience. But that's just a few.
That's a good pick, honestly. There's a movie called Out of Darkness from 2022. I think it was released in 23, but directed by Andrew Cumming, and it's set in the old Stone Age, and it's like a disparate gang of early humans that are banding together for like to find new land, and there's like some danger in the forest. So I think in terms of like the setting and the period piece and some like the danger that's implied in that movie, I think is I think it would work. And maybe we don't need like an ace level director, like one of these like the Oz Perkins or like the new like the horror kings of the current contemporary marketplace.
Yeah. One other that I just looked up. There's I don't know. I feel like there's a director named Karina Faith. There's a horror movie called The Power from 2021. She's another, like, her aesthetic. That movie I think was set in the 70s, and she was really, you just felt like you were drenched in that aesthetic. I feel like she could do some really interesting things here too. So I want to throw that name into the ring as well.
Okay, cool. I'll have to check that one out. Okay, so next question off the board. If you could ask one character from the film a question, who would it be, and what is the question?
Do you want to go first?
Let me see. If I had to ask a question to any character, maybe Jones, because he's been at the camp the longest. He was in a leadership position. He too was very infatuated with Boyd when he got there.
Yeah.
Like, I would ask him, like, is any of this worth it? Because he talks a lot about reading books like in their native languages and having time to just like be there and like needing to kill time. So yeah, like before we go on that hunt, like is you being here, like is any of this even remotely worth it to you?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. He talks about how tedious it is.
Yeah.
When he's talking about reading the books. I would ask Guy Pearce's character, Boyd, I would ask him, didn't it feel good, at least partially, when you took the enemy by storm, when you took them hostage, even though it happened through cowardice? Because I feel like, what does, like, his acting and then the makeup in that scene that happens at the beginning of the film, but like the stripes of blood over his face and the way his hair is arranged, it's really kind of like a primal, powerful moment. We get a glimpse of what he could be if he would embrace this side of himself. And I guess I would ask him, didn't that feel good? And isn't there more of you that is, maybe seduced by that desire than you are aware of or wanting to embrace? Because that was like, to me, that was a really cool moment in the film.
Yeah, it's almost like war paint that he's wearing in that. And like you can see how intense he is versus like when he just lays down in the middle of the battlefield and it's like, well, hopefully they don't realize I'm alive, all my friends are getting killed.
He's at the height of virility there. Like, like he's tan because he's been in the sun. He talks about his favorite activity is swimming. And so he looks like somebody who's been swimming and in great shape. And there he is holding the gun on all these people and single-handedly taking them, because that takes courage, right? Even if it perceives as a coward. I mean, that's a courageous moment. So I'd be like, don't you want to revisit that a little bit? Let's lean into that part rather than the other part.
Yeah, for sure. And I like, the leadership at that point tells him like, well, we could shoot you, but we're going to promote you because it would look bad to shoot the guy that took the fort over. But, we know that you're a coward and we hate you for it. But we have to reward you. So like that whole dynamic really like feeds into his character and his own, like his view of his own self-worth. So very interesting.
Big time.
Okay. Last question off of the board. This is a fun one for this movie. What movie snack are you going to pair with this movie?
Can we make like beef jerky?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like beef jerky. Like, I think I should just change it to what snack do you want to have with this movie?
Yeah, it's got to be. So we watch a lot of movies in our family room, which is connected to the kitchen, and I'm trying to be healthier. Well, not healthier, but I'm trying to get stronger. So I'm eating a lot of protein. So I basically eat like this hard salami or these turkey sticks like every time I watch a movie. So it would be a combination of those two things. Probably like a little bit like it would be make me feel a little queasy watching this as he's eating that wet bloody steak. But that's probably the perfect snack for this.
Seriously, if I were eating beef jerky while watching the movie, I would like just feel some kind of way about it. I'm like, what am I trying to do to myself here? But I agree. Beef jerky was the first thing that popped into my head, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Okay. Well, let's head over to more or less, and that's just, you're going to tell me one thing you want more of in the film and one thing that you want less of.
Okay, less, I feel like it works really well, but less of that opening approach to Fort Spencer with that kind of happy music and sweet, forlorn, melancholy music. And only because I want to get to it, only because I want to get to the characters interacting. But yeah, maybe shorten that by 20 seconds because I love the movie. What I want more of is feral Guy Pearce. I know the whole point is that he's not supposed to be that way until the end, but obviously I enjoyed that flash of it early on in the flashback, and so I just love it when he just finally just goes and confronts Robert Carlyle's character. It's just so satisfying, and maybe that's why it's so satisfying is because it's so cathartic because it was so withheld for so long. But yeah, that part was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Can't deny it. I would say the one thing that I probably want less of is, no offense to David Arquette, but less David Arquette. It's nothing personal, man. Just they make you kind of a throwaway stoner, and he just doesn't hold a ton of relevance to the story other than being there for the purposes of like Scream marketing, right? He's the cook, but we only really see him like maybe cooking once. He has to go get supplies, and they're like, yeah, no more whoring and like stay away from the peyote and the weed. So it's like, he lives way too long, I think, for the guy that is like the goofiest, most unaware person of the group. He should have been the first one gone, And I do like, though, that we do see feral Guy Pearce like murder him in his dreams, and like he's fantasizing about killing David Arquette. And I was like, so if it happens at that point in the movie, that totally makes sense. But then to like dream sequence it kind of like erases, I think, where his timeline should have naturally expired a little bit. And then I guess the thing I would want more of is the actual Carlyle caravan story. Like, 'cause he gives us some flashbacks of like what's happening, but like seeing maybe sort of if the story's told in sort of like two intersecting timelines where it's like we know that is coming, and meanwhile we see some of the Fort Spencer stuff and then they collide. Obviously it undoes the reveal and everything, but the whole like cannibalizing of that like Oregon Trail party seems like a really fun story to be a part of.
This is gonna you're just gonna think I'm ridiculous, which I am. But when I was dating, I told you I was dating my now wife during that time, right?
Mhm.
I would make her mixtapes, and between songs, I would include movie scenes. And I don't know how I did that, 'cause we had a DVD burner. I'm not sure if I did it that way or if I used the VHS and just recorded it. I'm not sure how I did it. But that whole embedded narrative that he tells with that music, I put that between a pair of love songs for her.
And it worked. She married you.
She married. How did she still marry me? I'm so weird. What weird. Yeah, because it's like Robert Carlyle is telling this story, and yeah, I remember so many. It's like in this groove in my brain, these so many lines from that story. Like I couldn't agree with you more. That's like catnip to me, man. That is so incredible. When he says, and Colonel Ives particularly could not be satisfied, right? Just little moments like that, little acting moments, little delivery moments are just, yeah, he says our hunger became more severe. And it's so legendary, dude. It's so legendary. But for some reason, my wife still married me, even though the Ravenous cannibal story is part of a mixtape in our lore.
You're gonna have to ask her about it after this.
Oh, she'll remember it.
Do you remember that? She's like, yeah, that was the skip track on the CD. Oh, okay. Well, let's go to Critics Corner and we'll hear from the critics and why they actually didn't like this movie. We've got a 46 Metascore overall on the board. Lowest on the board is a 20, and this is from New York Magazine, which in parentheses says Vulture, so must have changed. But this is Peter Rayner says, don't go to this movie on a full stomach. Better yet, don't go. So, yep, cannibal averse. Caught him slipping. Yep, he walked out. He's like, I just had lunch, came into this movie, cannibals. Now I'm upset.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go. We got 225s. So I'll let you choose between the San Francisco Chronicle and Rolling Stone.
Oh man, I love Rolling Stone. Give me the Chronicle then.
Okay. In concept alone, oh sorry, this is Edward Guthman. Gave it a 25. Says in concept alone, Ravenous is anything but appetizing, but in execution, it's worse than you'd imagine. Yeah. What? Didn't like it.
Wow.
I don't know, like with a movie about cannibals, I get the sort of like anything but appetizing in concept.
Sure.
And I guess if you're starting there though, like he's like, you got to really win me over if you're a cannibal movie. And I guess this one just didn't do it. But
it just begs the question: was it possible to win him over?
Yeah, I think that is a fair question, and unfortunately, I can't ask him. But Ed, if you ever hear this, send me an email. Send me an email. badmovieswelove@theshice.com. I will talk to you directly. Okay. Variety gave it a 40. This is Todd McCarthy. He says essentially approaches its subject seriously, but does take stabs both at horror and grotesque comedy, neither with much success. Huh. So Todd here at least recognizes what the movie is trying to do and just doesn't think it works. So I mean, look, for him at least that is sort of fair. But yes, I disagree. I think the horror works. It still freaked me out. I think the comedy was funnier than I initially anticipated too. Like, so I got more enjoyment out of the comedy side of things, and I think I got more out of the satire of the movie this time. But like the horror elements were still creepy. So for me, that's perfectly fine.
For those of you watching this that are going to go watch Ravenous, watch the moment where Toffler is the young holy man. He's playing, I think, an organ or piano or something, some sort of old-fashioned keyboard, and Jeffrey Jones's character asks him if he can go do it somewhere else. And Toffler like draws himself up and walks out with such, goes to do it. Not only does he get shut down, but then he's told to do this menial task. And then he walks out with such like attempted dignity. And so like little moments like that are so funny. Like I was like rolling as I was watching it again.
He's like on your way out, get us some ice.
Right,
like,
exactly.
What? He's like, yeah, go get me some ice. Oh man, it kind of like hangs his head like a scalded dog on his way out the door.
It's so funny because I mean it's there's something of that like a little kid being annoying, you know, like plinking on the piano loudly and you ask them if they can stop, please. It's so funny. Anyway.
Okay, let's see. We've got 350s on the board. So we've got TV Guide magazine, New York Times, and the Chicago Tribune. So you get to pick your poison.
Well, give me Chicago Tribune. I know that Ebert reviewed this. Is this Ebert's review or no?
This is not. This is Michael Wilmington from the Tribune says,
sure. Okay.
For about half its length, Ravenous is a fairly effective scare picture with a laugh or two. Then it just goes sour and pretentious. This is from March 19th of 99, so this is like opening weekend for the movie.
Pretentious.
Yeah. Don't like being lectured about American exceptionalism while you're watching your horror movie.
I mean, I guess that could have been at least, you know, acknowledges some positives early. So there's something.
Well, there, you know, we talked about this a little bit, but there's a quote that Ives / Colquhoun says during the film. We're talking about Manifest Destiny, and they're standing out in the cemetery of all places in the snow, and he's trying to convince Boyd to join them. And he says, this country is seeking to be whole, stretching out its arms and consuming all that it can, and we merely follow. So it does echo this notion of like the pursuit of the nation and the pursuit of consumption being like a very American ideal. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess if you don't like that with your folk horror, then it's not going to work for you. Okay. Well, we've got LA Weekly on the board with a 70. This is Ernest Hardy says, although the hinges connecting the film's elements, slapstick, political satire, thriller, gross out shots, sometimes squeak loudly, they hold the movie together nicely. I don't know, it feels like a backhanded compliment, but he gave it a 7 out of 10. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth and just, yeah. Green.
I almost feel like that's I don't know. I mean, he probably felt that exact way. So I'm not trying to psychoanalyze, but that does sound like the kind of criticism I'm talking about where people feel like they have to temper it. Yeah. They can't full geek out about something that's so weird and different. And maybe he didn't feel that way at all, even subconsciously. But I do think some people do that. But at least, like you said, 7 out of 10, that's good.
Yeah, and well, you brought his name up earlier, and in a weird, like the whole back half of 2025, our boy Roger Ebert has been at the top of the board like at least half a dozen times, and he's here again with a 75 for the Chicago Sun-Times.
That's why I watched the movie, by the way. I think was Ebert's review.
Yeah, and he doesn't even like horror movies, so I mean, for him to give it a 3 out of 4 on his scale is pretty high. But he says, clever in the way it avoids most of the cliches of the vampire movie by using cannibalism, and most of the cliches of the cannibal movie by using vampirism. It serves both dishes with new sauces.
Nice, Roger.
Yeah, and it gives it a little like extra flavor there on the end with the sauces, Raj.
And I don't think we've even mentioned vampirism other than my novel Dust Devils. But yeah, I feel like that there are, you know, these are not two separate circles on the Venn diagram. There is some overlap in a lot of different ways, like overlap in when you were talking earlier about Carlyle and Pearce and their characters ending up in the bear trap together. Like you don't have to leap too far to see like Lestat in Interview with the Vampire and like some of the desire for companionship and that sort of thing. So I think vampires and cannibals are bedfellows, literarily. Yeah. And I like that he kind of recognized that and saw those elements in the film. That's cool.
There's also a lot of impaling of one another in this movie, which is typically associated with vampires. I mean, they literally both die after being impaled and then trapped between the teeth of the gigantic bear trap.
Exactly.
We see, Guy Pearce's first exposure to it is drinking blood. We see when he slices Carlyle's hand outside that he like sort of waves his hand in front of him and he's like, you can smell it, can't you? So it's like this attraction to the blood is a very specific thing. And then something that is not mentioned explicitly in the film, but is sort of alluded to in the sort of like the body of Christ, is that like the wine at communion is the blood of Christ. And so it's not directly said, but there is this thing about like drinking blood and sort of it nourishing your soul. And like there's a lot of religious connotation going on there. And way to go, Raj.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've come to a fun point in the show. I mean, the whole show is fun, but this specifically, we're trying to convince people here to watch Ravenous. So what is a good gateway drug movie to convince people to take a chance on Ravenous?
A movie other than Ravenous to get people to check this out. Ooh.
Yeah, something that could like be a good launching pad is sort of what I've become accustomed to calling it.
Huh. I don't know why I'm thinking of this franchise because it's not that similar. There's just a couple connections. The Ginger Snaps franchise.
Oh.
And so there's this notion of having an aversion to becoming something else, but yet that siren's call to become something else is powerful. I think that exists in Ginger Snaps, and also one of the Ginger Snaps movies, I think 3 maybe, that I think was kind of underrated is a period piece, and so some of the setting of that reminds me of this. I love period pieces. Period. I think they're great. Horror, especially, I think can be interesting in a period setting, and so the Ginger Snaps franchise goes there also. So I would just, and also it's kind of darkly funny. And maybe it's a little more accessible because of the coming of age nature of it and the likability of its main characters. So I don't know. That's a weird path to take. But I would say if you like Ginger Snaps, then this would maybe appeal to you, or watch that first, and then if you enjoyed that at all, then you'd enjoy this maybe.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good pick. I have 2 because I think similar to why you chose Ginger Snaps. I would go with Raw, French Belgian co-production from Julia Ducournau. Sort of dealing with like the monster inside and not wanting to give into that and kind of like having to get into it. It's also like a coming of age story a little bit. Cannibalism. I think tonally it operates a little bit closer, where like there are some moments of humor, but mostly it's dialed into horror. The other one that I would say is Bone Tomahawk, because that is a Western folk horror period movie about cannibals. And it's good. So I think it's a little bit more maybe like more narrowly focused on the intensity and the fear of dealing with cannibals, and is less funny, but it is intense. And so if you just want to like thematically leap onto like Western and cannibals and like period piece, like that's a good one.
Got to be honest with you. I haven't seen Raw. I've been very aware of Bone Tomahawk for years, and I can name cast members. I can tell you what the plot is.
Wow.
But I'm a little afraid to watch it. I've never seen it because of a scene. You know the scene I'm talking about that I've heard about. It just sounds so awful and sounds so painful and nightmarish that I don't know. I admit this as a horror writer. I'm afraid of a lot of things. But what has been described to me that happens in that movie in a specific scene is so nightmarish that I'm not sure I want to see it.
It's gnarly. That's why I just was like, it's intense. Like it's intense in a way that Ravenous never quite ratchets up to.
Right.
It's like what's happening off screen in Ravenous that I think Bone Tomahawk really leaned into a little bit more. And as a little added bonus, David Arquette is also in Bone Tomahawk if you really just need to get your David Arquette fix. And I would say that if you do, the movie you got to watch is You Can't Kill David Arquette. Fantastic documentary. It's about his wrestling career. And like his unwillingness to sort of give it up, even though he's in his 50s, and like him wrestling the indie circuit. Fascinating movie, and really like give you some more appreciation for him, even though he's sort of cast into these roles of being like the goofball.
You know what I think he was in? Maybe have you seen the movie Spree with George
as the dad? He's great in that. He's hilarious.
So good, and that is
good.
such a great movie. I love that movie. I love his performance. I love Joe Keery's performance. That is so good. I love Spree. Anyway,
it just popped in my head the other day because we had covered it in Film Club like maybe a year or two ago, and then I was revisiting Virtuosity, and the character in Virtuosity, played by Russell Crowe, is like obsessed with media attention, and so he takes over a TV station and he's gonna like kill people live on television. I was like, yeah, he was like the worst kind of original influencer at the time, and so like Spree was definitely popping up again in my head. But yeah, very good, very simple, very funny as well, even though it's like a pretty dark horror movie at times too.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to mention specifically about this movie that you maybe didn't get a chance to say yet?
No, I think we covered it. Just watch it, people. Like, watch it and give it a chance. And I think you're going to see something really different. And marvelous performances, wonderful music, excellent direction, whip smart dialogue and screenplay, and tight editing. Like, this is a winner.
It is. And I want to close that out by quoting this article from Rolling Stone, which was, I think, for the 25th retrospect, the 25th year anniversary retrospective. But it was David Ehrlich wrote that Ravenous butchers the fantasy that the United States is a banquet with room for everyone at the table. This is a landscape where manifest destiny becomes a handy euphemism for all sorts of horrors, and a reminder that progress was never possible without savagery. The frontier was the Hunger Games, and it always has been. That may not be breaking news, but the film isn't interested in telling you something you don't know, only showing it to you in a way so giddy and gruesome that you'll never be able to forget about it.
Super well said.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And look, here we are. All these years later, still talking about it. We planned this years ago and made sure that it's going to happen, I promise. But you're a busy guy. We know this. You write a book, you release a book, you're writing another book, release another book. I mean, you never stop. But where can people find you? What are you working on now? What do you want to tell the people about?
So by the time this airs in February, hopefully this will have been announced. It's supposed to be announced sometime early to mid-January, but I have signed. There's my son calling me. I will call him right back in a second. I've just signed a 3-book deal with Blackstone and Weird Tales, and the 3 books are Marla, which there is a cult following for. It came out in a limited edition in 2022. I freaking love it. It's going to come out in June of this year, so get ready to get Marla. Please read Marla. I'm so excited about it. The next 2 books after that are called The Stars Have Left the Skies. That is a winter horror novel. And then there's one called Panopticon, which takes place in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California.
Hope somebody gets eaten in that.
Oh baby, there's going to be horror. I can't say what kind, but it's folk horror. I can say that. It's
okay.
In the Sierra Nevada mountains, interestingly enough. And so those are the things I can talk about. By then, by February, there might be more even that I'll talk about, but stuff happening in various parts of my career in exciting ways, but we'll just stick to that for now. Marla, June of 2025 or June of 2026. Also read Veil. That just came out in September 2025. So proud of my sci-fi horror novel. And then one last thing, if you're a Stephen King fan, The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales of Stephen King's The Stand. I wrote a short story for that called Lenora. Very proud of that too. So read that one as well if you got extra time.
Yeah, you're a huge Stephen King fan. So what was it like to step in there and like get to write one of it's like an anthology, right?
Yeah.
Of that world. So what was it like to be tasked with, writing for that project?
At first, this is going to sound like I'm a loser, but at first it was really scary and intimidating because all I could think about was that Stephen King is going to read this. this guy who has shaped me, made me into a writer, is going to read this. And so that was very intimidating to me. Once I got over myself and relaxed and started to write, the words flowed like they always do. And what I ended up creating is something of which I'm very proud. And also the coda on that story is that all the time I was thinking that Stephen King would read it. What I didn't really fully grasp was that Stephen King readers were going to read it. That is a very large group of humans, the constant reader category. And that has been so much fun because I'm a constant reader myself. I think my love for King's work shines through in that story. And I think quite a few readers who are his readers we've connected through that because they can see not only whatever skill I have as a storyteller, but they can also tell that he's part of my DNA. And I think that has helped them respond to me in a really, really positive, exciting way.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm really happy for you. I know you keep working. Like, you work so fast, I can't read it all in a timely fashion. So it's like I'm still on the end of Children of the Dark 2.
Yeah.
Right. And then I still got Veil after that.
Yeah.
So I think those were the two most recent up until now.
Yep.
So I'm getting there. But I just want to say thanks. You know, as you being as busy as you are, taking the time to do this. I know it's not always easy, so I'm very appreciative of it. You're welcome back here anytime. And I recently did rework how I do my interview series. So all of the interview stuff is basically here now on this show, and I do like a creative corner where I talk to creatives about their process and their work. And if you would like to come back and talk directly about sort of your writing process and your inspirations and your career trajectory and all that stuff, I'd love to have you. So please just keep me in mind.
I'm in. And thank you. It's always fun. It's an honor. I love your show. You do an amazing job. So this is nothing but my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and you have a good rest of your day.
You too, my friend. I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
A huge thank you to Jonathan for taking time out of his very busy schedule to be here and to celebrate the weird loveliness of this movie, Ravenous. He's got a lot of books to choose from, but his two latest, Veil, is a sci-fi horror novel, and The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales of Stephen King's The Stand, which is an anthology of writers telling stories within the world of The Stand. You can find those and all the others over at jonathanjanz.com, and I will make sure that I put the link for that in the show notes, so it's really easy to find. We've still got a couple of January stragglers on the way, including Bad Movies Monthly, where there are going to be some announcements. If you are interested in spending even more time together by becoming a contributing member, make sure to take a look at the show notes because sign-up details and the sign-up link are both in there for you. As far as the rest of February is concerned, we are keeping the Bad Movies We Love tradition alive by celebrating horror films here on the show. There is also going to be another Filmmaker in Focus episode coming out in February, and if you listen along, we just might have some surprises for you too. If any of those things sound appealing, make sure that you tune back in throughout the rest of the month and the rest of 2026. I know time is valuable, so thank you for spending your time listening to Bad Movies We Love. Until next time, stay safe, be good, do good, watch movies. Take care, everybody.